My stepmother was cheating on my disabled father. When I found out, she burst into tears. The first time I saw her hands tremble, it was early morning, just as the sunlight was slipping through the cracked blinds of our kitchen window. I was sitting at the table, watching my stepmother, Lisa, carefully folding a worn-out napkin, her fingers shaking slightly as if holding a secret too heavy to carry. My name's Mark, I'm 27, and for the last 5 years, I've been living in a house where every corner holds a silent tension I can't escape. My father, Jim, has been wheelchair-bound since a car accident left him paralyzed from the waist down. He's the kindest man I know, always patient despite the slow crawl of his days. After my parents split, Dad married Lisa, hoping for a fresh start. At first, it felt like a relief. Someone to help with the daily grind, someone to fill the quiet rooms. But slowly, things shifted. Lisa's smiles grew tighter, her eyes flickering away when Dad asked simple questions. I noticed how she'd check her phone in the middle of dinner, just long enough to disappear into the hallway for whispered calls. There was a routine to our days that felt off, like a clock running too fast or too slow. Dad's wheelchair would be parked by the living room window, sunlight catching the silver rims of his wheels, while Lisa busied herself in the kitchen, avoiding his gaze. One afternoon, I found her staring blankly at a framed photo on the mantel. Dad and me at a fishing trip, her lips pressed so hard they turned white. The air thickened around her, as if the house was holding its breath. What unsettled me most wasn't just the distance growing between them, but the way Lisa controlled everything. She arranged Dad's medications like a gatekeeper, and kept keys to his medical supplies close to her chest. When Dad asked her about appointments, she'd give vague answers, her fingers tapping nervously on the counter. It was subtle, a quiet imbalance that didn't scream but whispered danger. That morning, I caught sight of her again, this time clutching her phone beneath the kitchen table, a message lighting up the screen before she quickly hid it away. Something in her eyes shattered, and I knew then that whatever was happening had already started to unravel the fragile piece we'd been holding on to. I couldn't tell if it was guilt, fear, or something darker. Standing there, watching her tremble, I felt a cold knot tighten in my chest. I needed to know the truth. But the moment I asked, her face crumpled, and tears spilled down like a dam breaking loose. What she confessed next would change everything I thought I knew about my family, and leave me questioning who I could trust. In the days that followed, the air in the house seemed to grow heavier, each room a silent witness to the widening chasm between us. At dinner, I'd sit at the table, the clink of silverware against plates filling the space where conversation used to bloom. Lisa would pass by me without a glance, her eyes focused somewhere beyond the walls, as if I were just another shadow blending into the background. One evening, I reached out to pass Dad the salt, but Lisa's hand intercepted mine, her fingers brushing over mine with a coldness that made the warmth drain from my skin. She didn't say a word, but the gesture echoed louder than any argument. In the mornings, I found Dad parked by the window, his wheelchair angled just so to catch the sunlight. He'd smile at me, that gentle smile that always tried to bridge the distance, but Lisa was never there. Instead, I'd watch her move through the kitchen with a quiet purpose, her movements sharp and deliberate, as if she was closing doors behind her, both literal and invisible. I noticed the way she'd lock the cabinet where Dad's medications were kept, the key jingling in her pocket like a secret kept too close to the chest. Once, when Dad reached out to open it himself, she stepped between us, her body rigid, her eyes hardening in a way that made me flinch. The evenings were the hardest. Dad would settle into his chair, exhausted, while Lisa escaped to the bedroom, the door clicking shut behind her. I tried to catch her attention, to ask about the errands she was running or how the day had been, but she'd offer only a tight smile before retreating further into silence. There was a moment when I found her staring at her phone's screen in the dark hallway, the glow illuminating her face in a way that made her look both vulnerable and distant. She quickly hid the screen when I approached, but the flicker of something unreadable in her eyes stayed with me. I felt myself shrinking, becoming invisible in the very house I'd always called home. I stopped asking questions, stopped reaching out. The weight of being unseen settled in my chest like a stone. One afternoon, I caught a glimpse of the calendar pinned to the fridge, appointments crossed out, notes scribbled in Lisa's neat handwriting, none of which Dad or I had been told about. The realization stung, decisions made without us, plans unfolding in shadows. I wanted to confront, to demand answers, but the exhaustion wrapped around me like a heavy blanket, convincing me to wait, to watch. In the quiet moments, I'd find myself tracing the lines of the framed photo on the mantel, Dad and me smiling by the lake, a memory of better times, and wonder when everything had started to unravel. The house felt colder now, the light dimmer, as if the walls themselves were retreating, closing in around a truth that none of us dared to speak aloud. And in the silence, I felt it. A shift beneath the surface. Subtle, but undeniable. Like the first crack in a mirror that's never quite the same again. One evening, I was in the living room, scrolling through my phone to distract myself from the silence that had taken over the house. The faint sound of a message notification pulled my attention to the hallway. Lisa's phone had buzzed again, a sharp ping cutting through the stillness. Without thinking, I glanced up just in time to see her slip it into her pocket and quickly turn away, her face tightening for a split second before she resumed folding laundry. That brief flicker of guilt or fear, or maybe something worse, stuck with me. Later, I found myself standing just outside her bedroom door. The house was quiet except for the low hum of conversation. I hesitated, then pressed my ear to the wood. There, muffled but clear enough, were two voices, Lisa's and a man's. Their words were low, hurried, filled with laughter that didn't belong here, in this house built on careful routines and whispered worries. My heart thudded painfully against my ribs as I caught fragments. Can't wait to see you again. You make everything better. This has to stay between us. My fingers clenched into fists at my sides, nails biting into my palms. I stepped back, trembling, breath shallow. The air around me felt thick, heavy with a silence that wasn't empty anymore. It was full of the truth I hadn't wanted to face. My legs felt weak, and I had to lean against the wall to steady myself. The warmth in my chest drained, replaced by a cold numbness that spread from my stomach to my fingertips. I wanted to scream, to shout, to shake her until she looked me in the eye and explained why. But I was frozen. The sound of their voices, the casual betrayal in every word, shattered the fragile illusion I'd been clinging to. I closed my eyes, trying to block it out, but the pain settled deeper, raw, and relentless. When I opened them, Lisa's door creaked open. She stepped out, her eyes wide and red-rimmed, face pale. For a moment, we just stood there, her trembling, me speechless. Her hands shook so violently I thought she might drop the phone still clutched in her palm. The weight of everything pressed down on me, suffocating and sharp. The silence broke with her voice, quivering, broken. "Mark, I never wanted you to find out like this." But the damage was done. I wasn't naive anymore. The house, the quiet, the smiles, they were all part of a story I could no longer believe in. In that moment, I understood. The life I'd been trying to hold on to was gone, and nothing could bring it back. In the days that followed Lisa's tearful confession, the house grew colder in ways I hadn't thought possible. It wasn't just the absence of warmth in her smiles or the silence stretching between us. It was the subtle, almost imperceptible shifts in her behavior that began to gnaw at me. One evening, I found her sitting in Dad's wheelchair, her fingers idly tracing the worn armrest as if trying to memorize its texture. When I asked if she needed help, she shrugged off the question with a distracted glance, her mind clearly elsewhere. It was a small moment, but it felt like a breaking point. The person who was supposed to care was slipping away into a place I couldn't reach. Lisa's presence in the house became more erratic. She disappeared for hours without explanation, returning with a forced calm that never quite settled. I caught her once, hurriedly wiping the kitchen counter, her hands trembling beneath the rag, leaving streaks instead of clean lines. When Dad asked about her absence, she offered vague excuses, her eyes darting away before she could muster a believable answer. The tension between them was growing like a slow-burning fuse, and I was trapped in the middle, powerless to stop the coming explosion. One afternoon, while helping Dad with his physical therapy exercises, I noticed Lisa hovering nearby, her posture stiff and defensive. She kept glancing at her phone, her thumb poised over the screen, as if waiting for a message that might change everything. When I gently suggested she join us, she shook her head, muttering something about being too tired. But the truth was clear in her jittery movements and the way her gaze flicked nervously toward the closed bedroom door. The house felt like a stage set for a performance she no longer wanted to play. There was a new cruelty in her actions, subtle but undeniable. She began locking the cabinet with Dad's medications even more tightly, pocketing the keys during family meals, leaving Dad to ask me for help in hushed tones. I saw the confusion in his eyes, the frustration building as he realized the control slipping from his grasp. Lisa's insistence on managing every detail of his care became less about kindness and more about dominance, and I wasn't sure if she even noticed the damage she was causing. One evening, I found a note slipped beneath Dad's pillow, an appointment reminder scrawled in Lisa's handwriting, dated for a day she had never mentioned to either of us. When I confronted her silently by leaving the note on the kitchen table, she avoided my eyes and changed the subject. The avoidant behavior was a silent admission, but it left me with a knot of suspicion tightening around my chest. What else was she hiding? The worst moment came unexpectedly. I was in the living room when I heard the unmistakable rattle of keys and the soft click of the medicine cabinet unlocking. Lisa appeared in the doorway, clutching a small bottle that wasn't listed in Dad's prescriptions. Her face was unreadable, the calm before a storm. She noticed me watching and quickly slipped the bottle into her pocket, her smile thin and forced. I wanted to ask what it was, why it wasn't on the chart, but the words stuck in my throat. That silent exchange spoke volumes. There were secrets that would only unravel in their own time. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling as shadows shifted like silent witnesses to the unraveling of everything I'd believed in. The house felt like a cage, and I was the prisoner watching the walls close in. Then, as the clock ticked past midnight, a faint noise caught my attention. The soft creak of a bedroom door opening, a whispered breath, and the sudden slam of a window upstairs. I sat up, heart pounding, eyes fixed on the dark hallway where Lisa's silhouette disappeared. Something was about to break, and this time, I wasn't sure anyone would be able to stop it. That night, the tension in the house finally snapped like a frayed wire. I was in the kitchen, trying to clear the cluttered counters, when I heard the unmistakable sound of Dad's wheelchair rolling down the hallway. His voice was raised, shaky but firm, a rare edge cutting through the usual quiet. I followed the sound, heart hammering, to find him parked near the bathroom doorway, eyes wide with confusion and hurt. Lisa stood opposite him, her face flushed, hands clenched at her sides. The air between them was thick, charged. "Why didn't you tell me about the appointment?" Dad's voice cracked as he asked, his gaze searching hers for something she refused to give. Lisa's eyes flickered away, and then, without warning, she snapped, "You don't need to know everything, Jim. I'm the one taking care of you." Her voice was sharp, brittle, the kind of anger that cuts deeper than any words. I stepped closer, trying to intervene, but Dad held up a trembling hand. "No, Lisa. This isn't about control. It's about respect. About trust." His voice faltered, and suddenly the weight of his paralysis wasn't just physical. It was the heavy burden of being sidelined in his own life. Lisa's face crumpled, and she turned away, rubbing her eyes as if to erase the moment. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "I'm doing what I have to, Mark. You don't understand." Anger boiled up inside me, raw and fierce. "No, Lisa. We don't understand because you won't let us in. You're shutting us out, and it's breaking him." "Breaking us!" Her hands trembled as she reached for her phone, but this time I saw the hesitation. She didn't hide it. Instead, she stared at the screen, and then, with a sudden resolve, she pressed a button and called out into the dark hallway. "Mark, come here. We need to talk." I followed her to the living room, where the dim light cast long shadows. She sat down heavily, the phone still in her hand. "I'm scared," she admitted, voice small and unguarded. "Not of you, or Dad, of losing everything, of being alone." The admission caught me off guard, unraveling some of the anger I'd been holding tight. But the betrayal was still raw, a wound that refused to heal. "I don't know if I can keep pretending," she said, tears welling again. "But I don't want to hurt him. Or you." The room felt like it was shrinking, the silence stretching into something unbearable. I realized then that the fragile balance we'd been clinging to was gone, replaced by a fracture that would only widen. And as I looked at her, vulnerable but broken, I knew the choice ahead wasn't just hers. It was mine too. To confront the truth, no matter how painful, or to keep the silence that was slowly suffocating us all. The phone buzzed softly in her hand, a message lighting up the screen, a reminder of the secret still lurking in the shadows. I swallowed hard, heart pounding, and whispered, "What now?" But the answer, I knew, was nowhere in sight. After that night, the house felt different, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for something to break. I started leaving earlier in the mornings, telling Dad I had errands or work meetings, even when I didn't. The truth was, staying meant sitting in rooms thick with tension, where every glance or silence felt like a test I was bound to fail. I'd slip out before Lisa was awake, the front door clicking shut behind me, leaving only the faint echo of my footsteps trailing down the street. When I came back, I avoided the living room, where Dad usually sat by the window. Instead, I retreated to my old bedroom, the one I hadn't claimed in years. It was cluttered with forgotten things, dusty books, cracked photo frames, and my childhood baseball glove lying on the floor. Sometimes I'd pick up the glove, twisting it absently in my hands, the leather rough against my skin, grounding me in a way words never could. Meals became quieter. Dinner plates clinked softly against the table, but the conversations had stopped altogether. Lisa and Dad sat on opposite ends, the space between them filled with invisible walls. I caught myself watching from the kitchen doorway, my fingers tightening around the edge of the counter when Lisa's gaze slid past me without recognition. It stung more than I expected, that cold dismissal from someone who once seemed so close. I started biting my nails again, a nervous habit I thought I'd outgrown years ago. Each small tear in my skin was a secret kind of release, a way to channel the restless energy coiling inside me. I caught my reflection in the mirror one morning, eyes rimmed red, hair unkempt, and barely recognized the person staring back. The weight of everything was pressing down, dragging me into a silence I wasn't sure I wanted to escape. One afternoon, I texted my old friend, Jason, someone I hadn't spoken to in months. The message was simple. "Can we talk? I need to get out of my head." It was the first time I reached out since the fallout, a small crack in the walls I'd built around myself. When he replied almost immediately with a thumbs-up emoji, a flicker of hope stirred inside me, quiet but persistent. But the guilt settled in quickly after. I found myself pacing the hallway, running a hand through my hair, wondering if I was the one who'd failed Dad by not stepping in sooner. The thought made my chest tighten, a dull ache that refused to fade. I caught myself replaying every moment, the missed signs, the whispered lies, and the anger bubbled beneath the surface, sharp and raw. Yet, I said nothing aloud, instead folding it into the silent rituals of my days. One evening, as I was about to leave for a walk, I noticed Dad's wheelchair parked unusually close to the kitchen. For the first time in weeks, Lisa was there too, standing awkwardly beside him with a hesitant smile. They exchanged a glance that didn't quite reach their eyes, but it was there, a fragile connection, like a thread stretched tight but not yet broken. I hesitated, then took a deep breath. Maybe the silence was starting to crack. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way back from all this. But the path was uncertain, and as I stepped outside into the cool night air, I knew that whatever came next wouldn't be easy or quick. That evening, after saying goodnight to Dad, I found myself lingering by the window in my old bedroom. The city lights flickered softly beyond the glass, and for the first time in weeks, my mind wasn't consumed by the chaos inside the house. The quiet invited something new, a chance to breathe, to think beyond the walls closing in around me. The next morning, I made a call I'd been avoiding for too long. "Hi, is this Dr. Reynolds' office?" I asked, my voice betraying the nervousness I felt. "I'd like to schedule an appointment to talk about stress, family stuff." The receptionist's calm tone was a small comfort, and as I hung up, I felt a flicker of relief. Maybe talking to someone who wasn't family could help me sort through the mess in my head. That same day, I texted Jason again, this time with something more specific. "Can we meet tomorrow? I really need someone to listen." His quick reply, "Of course, I've got you," felt like a lifeline thrown across the stormy sea I'd been adrift in. Later, while helping Dad with a few chores, I noticed Lisa moving hurriedly through the kitchen, her face drawn tight with tension. Instead of retreating like before, I paused and said, "Lisa, can we talk?" Her eyes flicked up, surprise and something unreadable in their depths. She nodded, and we sat at the table, the afternoon light casting long shadows. I started gently. "I know things have been hard. Maybe too hard. I'm trying to figure out how to be here for Dad and for myself. But I can't do it alone." Her lips quivered, and for a moment, she looked like the woman I'd first met. Fragile, scared, but still there. She didn't answer, but the silence that followed felt less like a wall and more like a door left slightly ajar. That night, I found myself setting a small boundary, something I never thought I'd say aloud. When Lisa asked me to cover for her at an appointment she hadn't told Dad about, I shook my head. "I can't keep doing things in secret," I said, voice steady. "Dad deserves to know." "So do I." Her eyes darkened with frustration, but she didn't argue. Maybe, just maybe. The cracks in her armor were deepening. Over the next few days, I started small routines to reclaim a sense of control. Morning runs around the neighborhood, where the rhythm of my feet against the pavement was a reminder that I still had agency. Journaling late at night, scribbling down thoughts I couldn't yet say out loud. Each act was a quiet rebellion against the suffocating silence that had settled in the house. One afternoon, Jason and I sat at a coffee shop, the hum of conversation around us a balm to my raw edges. I spoke hesitantly about the betrayal, the distance growing between family members, and the guilt gnawing at me. He listened without judgment, offering perspective rather than solutions. For the first time, I realized that I wasn't alone in this, that maybe I didn't have to carry the weight by myself. Still, the pull of old loyalties tugged at me constantly. When I saw Dad's hopeful smile or Lisa's fleeting moments of vulnerability, the lines blurred. Could I hold her accountable and still care for her? Could I protect Dad without becoming the enemy in Lisa's eyes? The questions circled endlessly, their answers elusive. That night, as I closed my journal, I whispered to the darkness, one step at a time. The path ahead was uncertain, the shadows long and tangled. But for the first time, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't dared to hope for. A tentative resolve to face the truth, whatever it might bring. That evening, the house felt stifling, thick with the silence that had settled like dust in every corner. Dad was asleep in his chair, the soft hum of the night settling over him like a fragile shield. I found Lisa in the kitchen, flicking through a tattered recipe book, her hands trembling slightly as she traced the worn edges of the pages. The light above cast harsh shadows on her face, highlighting the tired lines etched beneath her eyes. I cleared my throat, the sound suddenly too loud in the quiet room. She looked up, startled, then quickly masked it with a tight, uncertain smile. "Lisa," I began, my voice uneven. "We need to talk. Really talk." She nodded slowly, closing the book and setting it aside with a deliberate care that felt like bracing for impact. I pulled out a chair opposite her, the scrape against the tiled floor echoing in the stillness. We sat, a gulf of unspoken words stretching between us. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I fiddled with the edge of the table, feeling the rough grain beneath my fingertips, grounding me. Her eyes darted around the room, settling finally on the clock ticking silently on the wall. "I know things have been hard," I said, attempting to soften the weight of what was to come. "For all of us." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "I never meant to hurt him," she whispered, voice cracking. "Or you." I swallowed the knot rising in my throat. Then why keep so much from us? Why the secrecy, the appointments, the locked cabinets, the other man? Her breath caught, eyes filling with tears that spilled down uneven cheeks. "I was scared," she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "Scared of failing, of losing everything I thought I had." I nodded slowly, the anger inside me dulling to a heavy ache. "But Dad deserves honesty. We all do." She looked away, shoulders trembling. I didn't know how to say it, how to be honest without breaking us. The room felt smaller, the air thick with regret, and the weight of years spent pretending. I realized then that this wasn't about blame, it was about fear. about the messy, complicated ways people try to hold on when everything feels like it's slipping through their fingers. "I want to trust you," I said quietly, "but I need you to let us in. All of us." Her gaze met mine, raw and vulnerable. "I want that too," she said, voice breaking. "But I don't know if I can be the person you need me to be." The silence stretched between us again, heavy and unresolved. Outside, a car passed by, headlights briefly lighting the kitchen in a cold glow. I felt the tension ease slightly, like a breath released after holding it too long. For the first time in weeks, the truth was out, not clean or easy, but real. And somehow, that felt like the beginning, even if the path ahead was still shrouded in uncertainty. I reached out, hesitating, then rested a hand lightly on hers. She didn't pull away. Not yet. And in that quiet moment, the weight of everything didn't feel quite so unbearable anymore. The days that followed our kitchen conversation felt like walking on thin ice, each step uncertain, each word weighed down by the fragile truce we'd somehow built. Mornings still carried the residue of tension, but there was now a new, tentative thread weaving through the silence. An unspoken acknowledgement that things had to change, even if none of us knew how yet. Lisa's movements around the house shifted slightly, less hurried, less guarded, but the nervous energy still lingered in the tremble of her hands and the quick, darting glances she shot when she thought no one was watching. I caught her once lingering by the medicine cabinet, key in hand, before she hesitated and locked it without opening. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes, an internal struggle over trust and control that hadn't yet found its resolution. Dad, for his part, seemed quieter than usual, retreating more often into his thoughts as if the upheaval had unsettled the calm he clung to. Yet, there were moments when his smile would break through, a slight curl of his lips when I handed him his morning coffee, or when Lisa, surprisingly, joined him by the window to watch the birds outside. Those brief flashes of connection were like fragile wildflowers pushing through cracked pavement, reminders that healing might still be possible. Our dinners, once arenas of silence or tension, began to carry hesitant exchanges. One night, Lisa passed the salt without her usual avoidance, and I caught the flicker of something resembling apology in her eyes. I responded with a nod, not quite a forgiveness, but a recognition that we were all stumbling towards some kind of understanding. Still, the gaps remained, words left unsaid, glances that didn't quite meet, and the weight of past betrayals hovered just beneath the surface, ready to resurface at the slightest provocation. I found myself slipping into new routines, sitting with Dad a little longer during the afternoons, helping him with small tasks without rushing, and occasionally sharing stories from my day. Lisa sometimes lingered nearby, her presence quieter, less intrusive, as if giving space while still trying to be part of the family fabric. It was awkward and uneven, like learning to dance to a song that had changed its rhythm, but it was something. Setbacks were inevitable. One evening, Lisa snapped at me over a minor misunderstanding, her voice sharper than intended, eyes flashing with frustration and guilt. The sting of her words settled in my chest, but instead of retreating, I held my ground, reminding myself that healing wasn't linear. We both needed room to falter without losing the fragile thread we were weaving. In the quiet moments, I noticed the small rituals emerging. Lisa leaving a folded note on Dad's bedside table with appointment details. Me texting Jason about the progress and pitfalls. Dad humming softly while watching the sunset from his chair. These little acts weren't cures, but they were signs of life beneath the cracks. One evening, as I helped Lisa clear the dishes, she paused, her hands trembling less than before. "Thank you for not giving up," she said softly, eyes searching mine. I nodded, feeling the fragile weight of those words settle between us. The house no longer felt like a battlefield or a prison, but a space caught between past wounds and the messy, uncertain work of rebuilding. It was far from perfect, and the future remained shrouded in doubt. But as I looked at Dad's peaceful face and met Lisa's tentative gaze, I realized that maybe, just maybe, we had taken the first step towards something resembling hope. Looking back now, I realize how much I was holding on to. The hope that things would just go back to the way they were before, or that silence could somehow protect us all. But it didn't. It only made the cracks grow wider, the walls thicker, and the distance between us feel insurmountable. Finding out about Lisa's betrayal was like waking up from a long, uneasy dream. The pain was raw, but it forced me to see things as they really were, not as I wished them to be. I remember those early mornings, sitting in the kitchen while Lisa's hands trembled, and I thought it was just nerves or stress. Now I understand it was the weight of everything she was trying to hide. Fear, guilt, and a loneliness that didn't excuse her actions but explained them. Dad's quiet patience, the way he smiled even when things were falling apart, taught me more about strength than any argument ever could. He needed honesty and respect, not control disguised as care. Over time, I learned where my boundaries had to be. I couldn't protect Dad by turning a blind eye, and I couldn't carry the burden of their secrets alone. That meant stepping up, speaking out, and sometimes stepping back when the situation became too much. It was messy and uncomfortable, but necessary. Healing isn't a straight line, and forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means acknowledging the pain, learning from it, and deciding what kind of relationship is possible moving forward. Lisa and I aren't where I hoped we would be yet, but there's a fragile thread of trust beginning to form. We still have difficult conversations, and there are moments when I have to remind myself that she is human, flawed and scared, just like me. Dad's presence grounds us all, a reminder of what matters most. We've all lost something: innocence, certainty, maybe even a version of family we once believed in. But we've also found the chance to rebuild, even if it's slow and uncertain. In the end, what I've learned is that truth is painful but necessary, and silence can't protect anyone. The hardest part is accepting that some wounds don't fully heal, but that doesn't mean we stop trying. We find new ways to live with them and new ways to connect despite them. If you've ever faced something like this, betrayal, family struggles, or the challenge of caring for someone vulnerable, I hope this story reminds you that you're not alone. What helped you find your way? Feel free to share your experience or thoughts in the comments. Sometimes, the bravest step is simply starting the conversation.